in a champagne supernova in the sky. Someday you will find me caught beneath the last line in a champagne supernova.
That's right, folks. We're talking about Supernova. Oh, wait, no, just the Nova Open and War Machine here on the pod. So strap in, settle down, get yourself a drink. Let's get into You'd Love It, You Know It, behind the numbers of the Nova Open. As always, Behind the Numbers brought to you by our friends at TI Calculators. When the numbers don't add up, it's probably a TI-85. All right, that's a joke and an advertisement. If you'd like to advertise in the pod, please contact me. Details below. Please like and subscribe. All of the social things, all of that. All right, let's talk about the Nova Open. You love it, you know it. It is huge convention in Virginia, and our good friends Tried and True help lead the way at this event from an organizational standpoint, along with the Virginianites that have helped them out this year, making it even bigger and better than it has been. Terrain looked absolutely amazing from the photos that everyone was sending over. Really quite a spectacular event. Their Masters was divided, or sorry, their IG was divided into 4 pods of 10 people each, all running simultaneously. So a 40-person event done simultaneously with 4 rounds to determine the top 2 in each pod, which would advance to the Masters on day 2 and would then play to determine the winner of the overall IG. So let's get into the numbers a little bit here in terms of how the pods were structured, some of the names you may know or need to know in each of the pods, and talk about how each of them went. And then we'll talk about some aggregate numbers here after that. So let's get into the numbers and then talk about what they mean. So in pod 1, we had a couple of folks that you probably have heard of. JVM was the headliner of this pod, along with Andy Cash. You see Ryan McCoffin also in there, Rick Coe, Adam Pricer, Michael Garabini, one of the hosts of Battle Driven was in there as well with Dan Schwinkenstein and Rob Landon. And then my local tournament organizer as well, Dan Hornacki, went ahead and had himself a day at this event. So let's talk about what the pod consisted of. So there were 2 Storm Legion players, 2 Winter Corps players, 1 Armored Corps player, 1 Gravedigger, 1 Orgoth, 1 Brine Bloods, 1 Shadowflame Shard, 1 Crix, 1 First Army, and 1 Storm Knights. All right. So how did this one go down? Well, Winter Corps ended up winning the day in this pod, going 4-0. Dan Hojnacki went ahead and had himself an absolute gauntlet of a rounds to take it out. In round 1, he had the mirror, as well as a Dan off against Dan Swinkenstein, again on payload, with a matchup of Dan on Sakura and Schwinky on Vilkul. Be sure to check out Battle Driven for some details around that game. But Dan went ahead and took that one on Scenario. In round 2, it was 2 fronts. Took on Andy Cash. Andy Cash was on Huxley. Dan was on Sakura. Dan won via assassination after going down heavily on Scenario. So Dan was able to pull that one out with an assassination victory for Sakura over Huxley. In round 3, Dan found himself against Ryan McCoffin. Dan on Baranova this time. In Trench Warfare on to good old Sorsha. And Baranova was able to take down Sorsha via assassination, which led him to the final boss, JVM, on Shadowflame Shard. JVM rocking a Shyrus list into Sakura. Dan able to win on Scenario on Wolves 14-8. So fantastic play by Dan, getting him into Masters in what was an absolute shark tank of a pod. Not that any of these that we're going to go over were not shark tanks of a pod, but just goes to show the caliber of play and player that was present at Nova. So that was pod 1. In pod 2, we have Cody DeMunn, Stephen King. We have our buddy, the Ice King. We've got Sam Vargas, Rick Schloxam. You may know him as one of the owners of Steamforge Games. So somebody making sure that their vacation was a write-off. Gotta love it. Good for Rich. We've got a couple of other folks from around the area there as well. So in this particular pod, we saw an army distribution of 1 Convergence of Cyrus, 1 Shadowflame Shard, 1 Storm Legion, 1 Winter Corps, 1 Temple Guardians, 1 Shadows of Retribution, 1 Dusk, 1 Infernals, 1 Storm of the North, and 1 Necrofactorium. So the 2 advancing from this pod, Corey DeMunn and Stephen King. Corey DeMunn on Infernals and Stephen King on Necrofactorium. Corey took on a route of Shadows of Retribution, winning by Scenario handily in Game 1. In Game 2, he fought Stephen King. Stephen King was on Kythos, and Cody was on Agathon. Cody won on Scenario on 2 fronts, 21-14. And then in the final round, Cordyban took on Dusk, Ice King as the pilot of Dusk with Moraine, with a 10-7 Scenario win on Trench Warfare for Cody to take the round. All right, on to Pod 3. Pod 3, again, some more names that you know. Dan Riker, Anthony Fashane, Chris Gunther, Danny McGee, Boogie, Dan Raven, Ryan Markwood, Brandon Ross, and TJ Lowell. along with Mikhail Kronrow. Really strong competitive pod here as well. Riker takes it down 4-0 with Crix right on his heels in second position and qualifying for Masters. Anthony Vachane with Crucible Guard. So pretty interesting to have Crucible Guard in the mix here and to be performing well. This was our most Crix heavy pod. Thus far, 3 Crix players in it, 2 Winter Core, 1 Orgoth, 1 Exalted, 1 Brine Bloods, 1 Crucible Guard, 1 Gravediggers, and 1 Storm Knights in this particular pod. Riker's path to victory. Read as Riker playing Aviserys into Shadow Tongue, winning 8-1 on scenario in payload. Aviserys again into Storm Knights Storm Knights with Jake's. So I'm assuming that is actually just a misselection by the player, and that should be Gravediggers. So Aviserys into Gravediggers, winning on scenario 9-1. Aviserys again for Dan in game 3, playing into Crucible Guard with Crucible Guard on Gerhardt. And then finally, in the finals, Subsira in the Crix-Off between him and Chris Gunther. Subsira into Kythos. Dan Reichert using Subsira to beat Kythos via assassination on Wolves, with 6-7 being the control points at the end of that. Looking forward to hearing the recap of those games on Battle Driven from Riker. All right, and then in Pod 4, we saw our most Infernals heavy pod, as well as our heaviest Shadowflame Shard pod. 4 Shadowflame Shard players in this pod, 2 Infernals players, 1 Orgoth, 1 Dusk, 1 Dark Operations, and 1 Crix. Justin Dew and Michael Savataran, both rocking Infernals and both making it to day 2. Honorable mention for Dark Operations. Justin's path to victory. Justin played into Dark Operations with Zadaroff in game 1, winning 9-3 on scenario. Then played Zadaroff again into Helith, winning via assassination. And then played a Zadaroff mirror into Michael Severin, winning 14-8 on Trench Warfare via scenario. So that sets up our Masters, and in Masters, we had quite an interesting and eclectic mix of armies. So from an army breakdown standpoint, we had 3 players on Infernals, 2 players on Crix, Necrofactorium, 1 player on Storm Legion, 1 player on Winter Core, and 1 player on Crucible Guard. Your top 3, Cody Damon on Infernals was able to take down the field, going 3-0. Right behind was Dan Horsnacki playing Wintercore, going 2-1 on the day, and then also Andy Cash going 2-1 on the day with Storm Legion. So pretty interesting top three here to round out your top four. Also Infernals with Justin Dew at 2-1. The other two Crix players, Riker was able to get a win in one round, otherwise was 1-2. King played one game, lost and dropped. Anthony also played one game, lost and dropped. So that is how your cookie crumbled in Masters for Nova. So what does it all mean? What does it all mean when you have 4 feeder events and some of the lowest percentage played armies make it into day 2? Well, generally it is about player skill more so than anything else in this game. This is something that I talk a lot about with a lot of different players of various skill level, and I will say consistently there are armies that can help raise your floor, generally meaning it is easier to get to a specific level of play or specific result with an army up to a point that you are able to close the skill gap with other like skilled players. Once you get to higher levels of play, most of that begins to vanish. Players can help mitigate situations, and often their lists are built very specifically to negate problematic matchups. And they have just a number of reps that can aid in all of this. But it is interesting to me that Infernals and Crix continue to outplay their representation in many cases, even accounting for player skill. These armies fundamentally have deep genetic advantages in the current packet, mostly around their ability to attrition better than most other armies, as well as have a very strong central melee core with a variety of casters that present radically different problems, and thus are a little more difficult for the meta to solve. Both can present a defensive skew and then present something else, and having the ability to account for each of those things in your army pairing can be very difficult to do, as well as then account for everyone else's matchups and sticks, so to speak, everybody else's gimmicks that you've got to then account for. So it is very interesting to fundamentally look at where we are at systematically and just kind of assess how all of it is. All right, so let's go in deep on the numbers for the event as a whole. I have created a little spreadsheet here, just looking at everything. So over the 4 pods, there was a total of 40 players, 10 in each pod. And we have a couple of interesting highlights. Our 2 most played factions were Shadowflame Shard and Necrofactorum, each with 6 players across all of the pods. So again, 6 for Necrofactorum, 6 for Shadowflame Shard, 5 Wintercore players for the 3rd most played faction. Then a tie between Orgoth Storm Legion and Infernals, each with 3. Dusk, Gravediggers, and Brine Bloods, each with 2. And then we had a huge smattering of additional armies of legend. We had Armor Corps. We had 1 player on Convergence, 1 player on Temple Guard, 1 player on Shadows of Retribution, 1 player on Storm of the North, 1 player on Exalted, 1 player on Dark Ops, and 1 player on Crucible Guard. So for a total across all of the events, 72.5% were on a pure Mark IV army. 27.5% of the players were on an army of legend. All right. So across all of that, let's take a look at who overperformed and who underperformed going into Masters. So the big number that comes up is that the armies of legend had 4 armies represented in Masters. Had 4 players represented in Masters over 2 factions. The Mark IV factions had 4 players represented across 3 armies. Based on our percentages played across the field, we have an underperformance of about 2 players by the Mark IV armies, and we have an overperformance of 2 players in the Legends army. So it was a straight 50-50 split in the Masters bracket, where it was an army of Legend or it was Mark IV. So some pretty interesting numbers there. Also of note, in the sort of expected, we had 6 players again for Shadowflame Shard. We had none of those players convert over to Masters. So our general expectation would be that about 15% of the field would be Shadowflame Shard. With none of the players converting over, that's a 15% underperformance. So that when we would expect 15% of the 8, or essentially 1 player, to be a Shadowflame Shard player, that's an underperformance. Crix had a mild overperformance. Crix got 2 players into the field of the top 8 with Necrofactorum, and that represented about a 10% increase over their expected. So our expected was a player, they got another player in. So a slight overperformance there. Major overperformance by our good friends, the Infernals. So Infernals represented about 7.5% of the field with 3 players out of 40. Their actual into Masters was 3 out of 8, or 37.5%. So that is an overperformance of 30%. So that is a major overperformance compared to what we would expect based on player population in the event. So long and the short of it is, if you played Infernals, you converted over to top 8. More impressive is that in one of the pods, we had 2 Infernals players. Both players converted over. In one of the other pods, it was just 1. One of the things hindering Necrofactorium having even better conversion rate is that in one of the pods there were 3 players, meaning at most they could only ever get 2 across the finish line in that specific pod if they were able to. Shadowflame Shard, one of the quirks of their numbers, remember we said that they underperformed. One of the quirks here is that in 2 of the pods they had 1 player. So in pod 1 and pod 2 they had 1 player. In pod 4, they had 4 shard players in the same pod. So again, the bulk of their population being put into a singular pod reduced their chances automatically of coming over, because again, only the top 2 in each pod would convert. And so that is an interesting piece of data when we look at this and talk about the over and under performance. So I actually think Crix could have had another player in had pod 3 not had 3 Crix players in it, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, in fact, that is essentially one of the story highlights here in that. So that's again some interesting pieces of data when we look at this. Infernals converting fully is not unsurprising. Convergence is, I'm sorry, not convergence. Infernals. Infernals is really performing outstandingly in the current meta. They are specifically built to take advantage of the current packet. They present some radically different concepts between the 2 casters that are being played the most currently, and their 3rd caster also creates a whole different world of options. But they have infantry that is very much overperforming, as what we would expect the field. You have the summoning mechanic, which continues to be. We have the summoning mechanic, which continues to be the most efficient mechanic currently in the game, and you have some solos with combinations of passive abilities that just take away a majority of what would standardly be counterplay. And so this is one of the reasons that you're seeing so much overperformance by Infernals in this particular event. So when we look at Masters itself, Masters was mostly Infernals, a little bit of Crix, and then a smattering of, a singular of Crucible Guard, which props to Anthony for making it over with Crucible Guard. And then my local, Dan Horzhnacki, making it over with his Winter Core after winning his pod 1, and Andy Cash on Storm Legion. So some pretty interesting data points in that we had a field that was 50-50 split in terms of legacy and Mark IV. We had some pod distribution that was a little awkward at points. And this is something I'll bring up as a spot where I think you as a tournament organizer that is going to be utilizing a pod method need to keep in mind the potential skewing that can occur when one pod is very heavily loaded with a specific faction compared to another, because you are going to introduce a significant number of mirrors. And sometimes you have no control over this, and other times you have some control over this. And so I think it does need to be thought of when you are shaping these pods and you're having these signups, that maybe once the signups are complete, if you have a high concentration of a particular faction in a pod, it might be appropriate to do some shuffling to ease that number. Just from a normalization standpoint, again, interesting bits with Winter Core as well. Pod 1 had 2 Winter Core players in it, and Pod 3 had 2 Winter Core players in it. Pod 2 had 1. Pod 4 had none. So, also interesting note is that Winter Core performed exactly as we would expect based on their population. They were 12.5% of the population. They got exactly 1 player into Masters. That would be our expected result for a singular player. And they got a singular player across the finish line. So it performed exactly on par. Signar slightly overperformed. Again, they were about 7.5%. They ended up with a singular player. So at 7.5%, we wouldn't exactly expect a player to come over. So Storm Legion was able to get their player across the field, so slight overperformance there. So generally, Mark IV performed on par or slightly better than we would expect. Legends, Armies of Legend, outperformed significantly in both. For Crucible Guard, they were 2.5% of the population, very, very low odds to make a top 8. They succeeded in making the top 8, about a 10% overperformance. So we would call that a slight to moderate overperformance generally. And again, Infernals with a massive overperformance. And we've sort of talked a bit about how Infernals is able to be as dominant as it is. And again, it comes down to the ability to defense skew with Zadaroff on top of having range reduction, on top of having not having rights of torment, just means that the mobility in that army, combined with its attritional play, the edge that its basic infantry have, and the combination of abilities that are passive on its solos, and surprise, surprise access to forcible rerolls, that sort of have a bit of a meta warping effect. These are the same elements in many cases that we see adding to Necrofactorium's success. When we talk about Necrofactorium's success, we need to look at the fact that their infantry is just pound for pound hyper efficient compared to a lot of the rest of the field. You have a great diversity of casters with a great diversity of questions that they present to the meta as a whole. You have hyper efficient jacks that are very good at trading. You have some of the best baseline recursion in the game, which we would expect from Crix. This has kind of been Crix's stick forever, is that they trade very well and they're really good at recursion. So not surprising. The bit that is additional to that is that with the advent of Kythos, Kythos presents a bit of a defensive skew that we have not seen in Crix currently in the meta. With that change, adding into all of these bits of being very good at recursion, having the ability to force rerolls on your opponent, having a diversity of casters that don't allow for simplistic answers, having a great concentration of infantry that is generally above par. Again, having jacks that trade very well and having recursion to back all of this up means that the tool set that you need in a given matchup with Crix can vary pretty significantly depending on who their caster is. And on top of that, they offer a defensive skew in at least one of their flavors. Now, it's very possible that that's not the best flavor to run. Also possible that you're going to see a lot of Kythos. I would expect to see a lot of Kythos in a team environment. I would expect to see a lot of Necrofactorium in a team environment, period. I think they excel at the team game. They're definitely excelling in single combat. Um, Infernal's also representing, I think, a part of the field for those that have access to them. They're going to perform well. They have generally performed well at team events. They've done well at team events in Mark IV and have done well in Mark IV in general. But this particular packet and this particular meta in which we find ourselves really accentuates the strengths of Infernals in a way that we just haven't seen in a while. And Nova, again, highlights all of this. The IG and the Masters were really interesting to follow. There's some games that you can watch on Ice King's YouTube channel. I would definitely encourage you to do so. I know a lot of other creators are doing some content around their experiences at Nova. I wasn't there, unfortunately. I was watching my son play his hockey at a tournament in another state. But very exciting stuff on the whole. But I think the real winner here is Winter Core performing exceedingly well in a very competitive environment. For those unaware about Nova IG, Nova IG had a significant portion of players that in the United States are rated very, very highly. In Pod 3, for example, there were 8 players out of the 10 that were rated between 400 and 700. In Pod 2, again, 8 players rated between 400 and 700. In Pod 1, again, 9 players this time rated 700 to 500, with the majority of players in Pod 1 being rated, or 8 of those players being rated between 500 and 700. And again, it's the incomplete ratings that we get from Longshanks. Not a perfect system, not anything to hang your hat on other than a neat bit of kit, but it does give a relative skill level and relative skill value. In Pod 4, you saw 6 of the players being between 400 and 700, with 4 of the players being between 500 and 700. So we have a significant portion of some of the best in the US at this event. Also, mind you, at the same time, same weekend, the Rocky Mountain Rumble was also going on, attracting a lot of West Coast players. So with most of the US meta engaged over the weekend, a significant portion at Nova, another significant portion at Rocky Mountain Rumble, and even some more players at the Mox, at the extreme end in Washington State. Very busy weekend for War Machine, especially high-level War Machine in the U.S. So, what does it all mean to us? I think ultimately, right now in 2025, as we approach list lock for WTC, which again, major focus of this podcast is competitive play and review of the general meta within a competitive context in the United States and the rest of the world. We try to be as extensive as we possibly can. Again, this is currently rooted in Nova and getting an understanding of everything that has gone on at Nova. To that end, there was a team tournament as well. The NAWL, or North American War Machine League, in-person event at Nova, a three-person team event. 16 teams participated for a total of 48 players. We'll get into that player breakdown now. We had 9 players on Winter Core, 6 players on Necrofactorium, 4 players on Shadowflame Shard, 3 players on Infernals, 3 players on Orgoth, Sea Raiders, 3 players on Gravediggers, 3 players on Storm Legion, 2 players on Armored Core, 2 players on Dark Ops, 2 players on Brineblood Marauders, 2 players on Dusk, 1 player on Shadows of Retribution, 1 player on Devourer's Host, 1 player on Rulic Guard, 1 player on Exalted, 1 player on Crucible Guard, 1 player on Old Umbry, 1 player on Secret Dominion, 1 player on Convergence of Cirrus, and 1 player on Final Interdiction. So the NAWL team event was 4 rounds. Again, it's a 3-person team event utilizing German-style rules. For those unaware, the way that works is that each team gets to, team number 1 gets to pick the person from their team at table number 1, and team number 2 gets to pick the person at table number 3, meaning that they are placing their player down on that respective table. Table 1 for team 1, table 3 for team 2. They then receive the other 2 players' cards. They get to make their selection, and then the remaining player goes to table 2 for both of the teams. So gives you a little bit of control in where the matchups go, but not as much as in a 5-person team event. So a little more random as far as that goes. Your top 5 in the event, they had Digidirty, which is a team comprised of Infernals, Gravediggers, and Shadowflame Shard. Took the top honor with going 4-0 as a team. In second place was Dirty Mike, is questioning the choices that led him to this place with Gravediggers, Orgoth, and Dark Operations. In third place was a team with Infernals, Necrofactorium, and Storm Legion. Fourth place, Orgoth, Winter Core, and Shadowflame Shard team. And in fifth place was Touchgrass. The fifth place team was, look, I don't think this through and don't know what name to put. I asked my teammates and they ignored me, which honestly feels bad. But they don't know is I cut the brake lines and, well, we'll all be together for the rest of our lives. Limit. Which was a team of Devourer's Host, Storm Legion, and Necrofactorium. So a couple interesting bits in the team tournament. Of the top 5 teams, 2 of the teams were running Infernals, 2 of the teams were running Gravediggers, 2 of the teams were running Storm Legion, 2 of the teams were running Shadowflame Shard, 2 of the teams were running Necrofactorium, 1 of the teams ran a Winter Core, 2 of the teams had an Orgoth player. So quite a diversity at the top with some slight repeats. And if we drop down into the number 6 slot, we had Necrofactorium, Winter Core, and Orgoth again. So again, very heavily dominated by Mark IV, with a small smattering, mostly Infernals, of Armies of Legend. Devourer's Host was in the running here with the 5th place team. So there's your outside oddball for Legends. So again, what does it mean from a team perspective? One of the things I found pretty interesting is that Gravediggers was able to convert the 1 and 2 spot in a team tournament environment, which makes a lot of sense to me. Uh, they are a very good faction that requires a lot to go right in every game. And what I mean by that is you have to have a very pristine decision tree as the Gravedigger player, and the opponent has to have an even better decision tree based on what you do, what you execute, and how those games break down. So there's a lot of potential failure points for Gravediggers, particularly when they are not able to have matchup stability. And what I mean by that is there's not many things that Gravediggers struggle into, but the few things that they do can derail a tournament run, can derail a run to the top of an event. In a team environment, you can smooth that by eliminating the situations where they're not as comfortable or where the numbers get a little bit dicey based on um, the rest of the composition of your team. So Gravediggers performing well, or two of the teams with Gravediggers performing well in the team environment and overperforming their performance in the singular environment, not overly surprising to me. Infernal's having a strong showing, again, very much known. What's interesting is 3 Orgoth players and the three teams that had Orgoth on them, all were in the top 6. Again, not surprising to me. The real strength of Orgoth is less so in, again, an individual environment where they are prone to some significantly bad matchups that can really derail a run or generate a list chicken. Very notably, Crix. Crix is a Necrofactorium. Is a spot that you have to very much tech for as an Orgoth player, and even then, you need a lot to go right to have a really competent and clean matchup into them where you feel very confident enough to win an event. Not saying it's impossible, but I will say it's a lot easier as an Orgoth player when Necrofactorium isn't in your field. And obviously it was in the field here quite a bit. But in a team environment, you can again curate that matchup, limit the downside, and with what Orgoth presents, which is a very compelling set of questions of how do you get through this Harask brick that I'm putting into your face with all of these boxes, all of this beef, can you get through it or not? And asking those type of hard questions in team environment is very valuable. So again, seeing them perform with the highest performance of a team with Orgoth on them, being in second place, and again, no worse than 6th in the overall, is again very unsurprising to me. Again, from a team perspective. Also of note, the sheer volume of Wintercore players in this event was staggering. Highest rated Wintercore, or highest placing Wintercore for the event was 4th. 6th place team also had a Wintercore player on it. 7th place team had a Wintercore player on it. And 8th place team had a Wintercore player on it. Also of note, the last 2 placing teams, the 15th place team had 1 Wintercore on it. The last place team was all Wintercore players. So 3 Wintercore players in Glorious Khador. Fantastic name. Team underperformed, but I'm sure they had a great time. And then 11th place team had a Wintercore player on it. But a lot of concentration of Winter Core towards the top half of the event. Again, 16 teams here, 3 players each, with the bulk of the Winter Core players being in that top half. Very good to see on the whole. Shadow Flame Shard, again, kind of a mixed bag for this event. You had the overall winning team with a Shadow Flame Shard player on it. You had the 4th place team with a Shadow Flame Shard player on it. And then you had the 11th place team and the 14th place team with a Shadow Flame Shard player on it. So a lot of variance, as we would expect at an event. Not overly surprising. One interesting bit is the 2nd place team also had a Dark Operations player. Dark Ops is in a very interesting spot. They've had a major refresh that has come through with not only some rules changes and some acquisition of new units, they have really been revitalized and made into more of a Mark IV faction legitimately, and are less so an army of legend anymore, but I have not moved them over to a pure Mark IV yet, because again, they are kind of a hybrid, where they have some brand new toys, they've had a little bit of a retool, but ultimately they are still the same faction that they sort of were, but also aren't. Again, the new tools that they've gotten have really upped their ability to play in this packet. And again, we see strong emphasis on recursion, strong utilization of infantry, ability to skew a little bit, really just able to attack the game in a slightly different way, and attack the game differently based on the casters that they bring. So a lot of opportunity with Dark Ops. It's a player that I think you will see at WTC for certain. I don't know how significant a player it's going to be, but I do expect some teams to take advantage of the fact that it is there. One additional note that I will talk about is Old Embry boxes were basically in flight for the overall event, and Nova, for those that aren't aware, Nova is a fully painted event for the IG. IG qualifiers are generally an all painted requirement per SFG, particularly when they are actually present at the event. And SFG was present at the event. Rich Loxham, Matt Hart were there. Rich Loxham was actually playing in the IG. So yes, premier event that actually has ownership from the company playing in said event. So not surprising that we didn't see much OU. I think you will start to see more OU as we continue on. I will be interested to see the percentages at WTC. That is the army that I have been playing most recently and will continue to play. Very excited for them. You can follow all of my painting stuff over on the YouTube channel. Yes, I have a YouTube channel, Tyrants on the Field. Check me out. We do a whole bunch of stuff over there. We do some painting tutorials, we do shorts, we do some lore videos, a whole bunch of stuff coming. You'll have some more content coming up shortly, and I've got a bunch of great surprises coming up this year, or the remainder of this year. But this team event, really great to see. A celebration of what I do in the Delaware Discord and have for the last almost 2 years now with the NAWL, or the North American War Machine League. Great to see this 3v3 team event in person. Executed, again, hats off to all of the volunteers, to Erica and Paul and Andy, and all of the Virginia crew that helped get all of the tables created and ready, except for the volcano table, which is apparently a story to tell from a competitive table standpoint and everything else. But from a general visual impression from the pictures of the event, everything looked really great, really professional. They've done a bang up job again with Nova. Big congratulations. Looking forward to them being even bigger and better next year. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.